This is going to broadcast in a moment. Okay, don't want that. Okay, I think we are started. So welcome, I'm Dr. Yo. This is Q&A with CPE. It's a weekly series where I or another member of the College Prep Express team answers questions from students, parents, teachers about the college admissions process, any facet of the college admissions game from 9th grade through 12th grade. And tonight, in honor of the PSATs coming up next Wednesday and Saturday, we're doing a special PSAT Q&A. So I have very little structure. It's a Q&A. So basically, the way it unfolds is people ask questions. I do my best to answer them. I will say this, however, that I did post in the chat section of the Google Hangout some of the, I think, most useful word lists to get ready for the PSATs. I'll just maybe talk for a couple of minutes about what's on the PSAT for people who've never taken it before, and then open it up to questions. We have a couple of people participating, maybe more viewing, I don't know. And then I'm sure some people will watch this on demand because it's posted to our YouTube channel after the broadcast. So, the PSAT, excuse me, a lot of people think of as the practice SAT, P for practice. That's wrong. It's actually not wrong to think of it as a practice SAT, but that's not what the P stands for. Technically, the P is preliminary. It's the preliminary SAT. The formal name is the PSAT NMSQT, the preliminary SAT National Merit Qualifying Test, standardized qualifying test. And the idea is that if you do really well on the PSATs, you can get money. You can get merit-based money towards your college tuition. You can also get accolades that can play well on your college application. So, for example, if you do above a certain threshold, the first level is what's called a letter of commendation. That's a feather in your cap. That's reportable on your Common App under the academic honors section. Then there's other levels of achievement, quarterfinalists, semifinalists. If you make it to that level, then you have to write an essay, and you can become a finalist, and those are where the big money, and they give, I think, scholarships, including free rides. It also depends on where mom and dad work and what their company might contribute to the program. But for the vast majority of students, and by vast majority I mean like virtually all of them, the main reason to take the PSAT is to get a sense of what the SAT will be like. The SAT is one of the two most popular and one of the two required by most schools college entrance exams. The two exams that most schools today still require students to submit are either the SAT or the ACT. They were in the media quite a bit over the summer, largely, excuse me, because the ACT in 2012 for the first year outsold the SAT, and so the SAT, they would never say this, but in my opinion, kind of in response to that fact, announced a number of changes, all of which, well, that's an exaggeration, most of which make the SAT very much more like the ACT than it ever has been. For example, they're doing away with the guessing penalty. They're making the essay optional. They're doing away with the SAT vocab, those hard 50-cent words that you only see on the SATs, which of course isn't true. You hear them all the time from professors in college, but the word on the street is you only hear SAT vocab on the SATs. They're doing away with that. So anyway, having said all that, the PSATs are given in October each year. They're intended for juniors. However, in the last couple of years, a lot of sophomores take them too. And the reason is that the more practice students get with standardized tests, the better they end up doing in the long run. So I agree with that strategy, taking it in 10th grade and 11th grade, with a few exceptions. If there is if you know your child, for example, is achieving below grade level, hasn't learned all of the material that's covered on the test, and is likely going to do poorly if they take it in 10th grade, in those cases, it may be best to wait until they learn all the material. But students who are achieving at or above grade level in 10th grade have already seen all the material that they're going to need to see. So what exactly is the material that you have to know on the PSAT? Good question. Glad somebody asked. Basically, there are three bodies of material. And I apologize for having to drink a lot of tea during this talk, but as you may hear, I've been staving off a cold for almost a week now, and, well, I need the tea. So, the three bodies of material are vocabulary, math, and grammar. So the vocabulary is essentially a list of approximately 500 words. The good news is we know what they are, and most of them are freely available on the web. If you look at the group chat component of the Google Hangout, you'll see I posted 3 very popular and very useful word lists. The 100 most common SAT words, the 250 most common SAT words, and then a list of all of the challenging words from the 2013, last year's PSAT, from the Wednesday exam. These are all word lists that I use at College Prep Express with my students. The links are to Quizlet, which is, oops, excuse me. Sorry, I'm ringing in 19 places. That's bad. Okay. I basically went through last year's PSAT with a couple of students after they got them back, and I made a Quizlet list. Quizlet is, in my opinion, one of the greatest free digital tools. It's essentially, most students today are familiar with it. If you happen not to be, you should get familiar with it. It's a great tool. It's essentially virtual flashcards. You can use already made flashcards like the ones that I put in the group chat section, these vocab lists. You can also make them on the fly, and they work not just for vocab, but for things like history with very sophisticated and detailed ready-made backsides of the flashcard. So, for example, you could type in the Battle of Gettysburg and find out all kinds of information about that and make your own flashcard. You can basically take a teacher's review packet and turn that into a set of flashcards in no time at all using Quizlet. So the first body of material then on the PSAT is vocabulary. The way you're tested on the vocabulary is in items known as sentence completion. That's where you'll be given a sentence with 1 or sometimes 2 words omitted, and there'll be blanks where those words should go, and the answer choices allow you to plug in the different words to see which one fits. It's essentially a test of vocab. If you know all the words, it's not really hard to figure out which word goes in the blank. If you don't know the vocab, it's impossibly hard. So the sentence completion is essentially a test of vocabulary. The second body of information you have to know on the PSAT is math. And by the way, for the people who are in the video, in this Google Hangout, feel free to interrupt me at any time and ask questions. I mean, this is a very informal, I don't mean to make it sound so formal. So, I'll certainly open it up for only questions and answers shortly, but don't wait. If something I say doesn't make sense or you want elaboration, feel free to chime in. The math material covered on the exam, if you read what the College Board says, they say, well, you have to know essentially all of arithmetic, all of Algebra 1, geometry, and 15% of Algebra 2. Frankly, I don't think that's accurate. I think a more accurate description would be, yeah, you need to know all your arithmetic. You need to know a thin slice of Algebra 1, an even thinner slice of Algebra 2, and a thin slice of geometry. The good news is that it's the same thin slice, test after test after test. The reason that preparation, study, taking practice tests, reviewing material works, the reason why people's scores go up if they engage in these activities, is that the test is the same test after test after test. Every year I delude myself and I get excited when a new PSAT comes out. I'm like, oh good, new words, new math, new grammar. Nope, nope, and nope. It's all the same. That's good news from the student's perspective because you don't have to worry about studying, like for example, these top 100 words, top 250 words, or studying the math material that we know is on the test, and then worrying that you're going to show up on game day and they're going to test you on different words and different math. We know exactly what's going to be on the test. For example, I'm talking about math. You're guaranteed to see next Wednesday or next Saturday circle problems. You have to know the area of a circle. You have to know the circumference of a circle. You have to know the Pythagorean theorem. You have to know there are 180 degrees in a triangle. You have to know mean, median, and mode. Okay, these concepts are always on every PSAT. In the same way, we know there are certain topics in Algebra 1, geometry, and algebra that are never on the test. You never have to know. The hardest part about geometry, anyone who's taken the course knows, are the proofs. There are no proofs or even semblances of proofs on the SAT or PSAT. Something's happening right now. I don't know what. I hope this is still working. Would not be the first time I'm talking to dead air. Do you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. We know, for example, there's no proofs. There's none of the more complicated theorems. What you need to know about geometry can fit in 2 or 3 pages. And in fact, in my SAT prep packs, which I think are available for like $5, give or take $1, I have a document called the Math Review Packet. It's literally 12 pages of everything that's on the test. And the geometry is a small piece. It's essentially Pythagorean theorem, 30, 60, 90 triangles, 45, 45, 90 triangles, the concept of similarity, the concept of congruency, basic geometry. There's also a fairly large list of material that isn't on the PSAT or SAT that is on the ACT. And that list would include things like basic trigonometry. There's no sine, cosine, tangent. There are no logs. There's no I, no imaginary numbers, no complex numbers. There's no equations of circles, hyperbolas, or parabolas. So if any of that stuff starts making you feel anxious, don't worry about it. It's not on your test, okay?
Wait, you're just talking about the SAT, right? That's on the ACT, though.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. The PSAT and ACT don't have that material. The ACT does.
You said the PSAT and ACT.
The
PSAT and SAT.
Thank you, young Amanda. Okay.
Got you covered,
Everybody clear now? All right. So
yeah.
The third body of material after vocab and math is grammar. Interestingly, I always like to say this when I talk about the PSAT. When you get your scores back in mid-December, you will get scores in 3 tests. You will get a critical reading score, which has questions in sentence completion, that's the vocab I talked about, and passage-based questions, reading comprehension. You will get a score in math, that's the math test, and you will get a score in a test called writing. And yet, you do no writing on the PSAT. I find that funny. They're giving you a score in a writing test without asking you to do any writing at all. So what's the writing test? Good question, glad you asked. It's a grammar test. It's 35 minutes of multiple choice question, or 30 minutes, excuse me, on the PSAT. It's 35 on the SAT, but 30 minutes on the PSAT of basically sentences where parts of it are underlined and you have to figure out if something is ungrammatical about one of those underlined parts and just identify which part is ungrammatical. So that's the material. A bunch of words, thin slices of the math curriculum in 9th, 10th, 11th grade, and a bunch of grammar rules. And by a bunch on the PSATs, there's essentially 7 that you have to know. I'm just going to say them slowly, you know, if anybody is taking notes on this. Again, these are these are outlined and actually described in some detail with examples in the prep packs. If you want to buy those, that's great. But here are the 7 rules. The most commonly tested grammatical mistake is subject-verb agreement. Second one is pronoun antecedent agreement. So even if you don't know what an antecedent is, don't worry. Basically, be on the lookout for pronouns. If you see pronouns, and most students, even if they can't define a pronoun, it's a word that takes the place of a noun, they know one when they see one. Be very suspicious of pronouns. I tell my students, pronouns are the single biggest perpetrators of grammatical crime on the writing test and the PSAT. So if you see a pronoun, I, me, my, you, your, he, she, it, they, them, their, whoever, etc., you circle it as a strategy, test-taking skill. You circle it, and then you ask yourself, what noun in the sentence is this pronoun taking the place of? And if you can't point to that noun, it's a bad pronoun. It's an unclear reference. Or if you can point to the pronoun but it doesn't agree. For example, if I say, the teacher said everyone should bring their calculators to the next test, that may be fine in spoken English, and I don't think people would think that sounds too funny. But in standard formal written English, there is a pronoun trying to take the place of everyone. Everyone is singular. So in standard written English, we'd have to phrase that sentence, the teacher said everyone should bring his or her calculator to the test. Or the teacher said all the students, plural, should bring their calculators to the test. So just be on the lookout for pronouns. They're bad guys. The next most common grammatical error surrounds parallel structure. Parallel structure essentially is a rule that says if you want to express similar ideas in the same sentence, you ought to use similar or parallel grammatical structures. So for example, we would say, I like to run, to jump, and to swim. I wouldn't say, I like to run, to jump, and swimming. Right? Our ear immediately picks up swimming, not good. It's out of parallel with to run and to jump. So here's a really good strategy if you're taking the test next week. Be on the lookout for sentences that talk about 2 or 3 things. If they say, blah, bitty, blah, bitty, blah is both blah, blah, blah and blah, 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 they're asking you to look at the parallel structure. Whatever follows the both and the and have to be similar grammatical structure. So both a noun and a noun, both an adjective and an adjective. So the critics called the symphony beautiful because of its final movement, but confusing because of its mixed tempos. That's parallel. Beautiful because of this, but confusing because of that. And you can sort of mathematize it, as the name parallel structure would suggest, by looking for similar or parallel grammatical structures. Excuse me. Okay, the next most commonly tested error would be faulty comparisons. Faulty comparisons, there are obvious ones, like if I said, Amanda is a better skater than any other team in the division, we'd right away say you can't compare one skater to a whole team. They sometimes are less obvious. For example, if I said the weather in Florida is better than any other state in the country, that might slide by some people's oral radar, but if you really look at that sentence grammatically, you're trying to compare the weather of one state, namely Florida, with whole other states. They're not comparable. That's apples and oranges. So you would have to say the weather in Florida is better than that of any other state, or the weather in Florida is better than any other state's weather, or the weather in Florida is better than any other state's with an apostrophe S. Next rule is misplaced modifiers. The rule with modifiers is whether it's a single word like an adjective or an adverb, or a phrase or a clause functioning as an adjective or an adverb, the general rule in English is you should put those modifying words and phrases and clauses as close to the words they modify as possible. The most common misplaced modifier on the PSAT will be the dangling participial phrase. Don't let that grammatical jargon freak you out. Some schools teach it, some schools don't. It doesn't matter that you know the term dangling participial phrase. What matters is that you recognize when you see one. And these are the I think the funniest, the most comical sentences because when you look at them grammatically, they make no sense. For example, running down the stairs, the sneaker caused him to trip. So everyone would know what that sentence is trying to say.
Haha, I get it. They're saying that the sneaker tripped.
It's saying the sneaker ran down the stairs and tripped some dude. Okay?
Yeah.
So you can't say running down the stairs, the sneaker. So here's the strategy.
That's such a good example.
You have to say running down the stairs, he tripped over the sneaker. So usually these participial phrases begin a sentence. Running down the stairs, chasing after the bad guys. Or sometimes they're in the past tense, like posted to the wall. Here's a funny one. Posted to the wall. Posted to the wall, she saw the sign announcing the senior prom. Okay, grammatically, what that means is she was posted to the wall. Somebody staple gunned her during third period to the wall. And she says, hey, look, a sign announcing the senior prom. Okay, wait, because posted to the wall is a participle modifying she. So you'd have to say, she saw a sign posted to the wall. It's the sign that's posted, not she. Okay, and then the sixth one is what we call comma splices. Okay, comma splices, no good. A comma splice happens when you take two perfectly good standalone sentences, what grammarians like to call independent clauses, excuse me, and splice them together with a comma. So, for example, it's grammatically incorrect to say, we went to the store, comma, we bought eggs. You have to say, we went to the store, period, we bought eggs. Or we went to the store, semicolon, we bought eggs. Or we went to the store, comma, and we bought eggs. Or we went to the store where we bought eggs. But you can't take two standalone sentences, splice them together with a comma. These are all over the PSATs. So just take a look at those compound sentences. When you see there's two clauses, if they're independent clauses, meaning they could stand alone as their own sentence, and they're spliced together with a comma, that breaks a grammatical rule called the comma splice. Okay? The last one to be on the lookout for is the idiomatic expression and irregularly conjugated verbs. This is, I would say this is like the seventh one and kind of the hardest in the sense that there's no rule to learn. It's not like I can tell you verbs agree with their subjects, pronouns agree with their antecedents. Those are rules, right? Parallel structure, similar ideas have to be expressed in similar grammatical constructions. With verb conjugations and idiomatic expressions, you just have to know them from speaking the language. Now, having said that, it's really valuable simply to know that idiomatic expressions are one of the things they're testing you on, because if you don't know to look for them, they might fly under the radar. Okay? Idiomatic expressions in English, as in other languages, are ways that we say things that don't necessarily follow rules or logic. For example, in English we say, I arrived in this country. If you were French, you would say, I arrived to your country, or I arrived at. We just know in English, because we're native speakers, I arrived in New York 3 days ago. Okay. We say things like, I am interested in a subject, but I'm obsessed with a subject. I'm preoccupied by a subject. Why is one in, one with, and one by? I don't know. That's just how we do it in English. Those are idiomatic expressions. So the thing is, be on the lookout for them. That's one of the things they're testing you on. And again, they could fly in the radar if you're not aware of them. So for example, they might have a sentence like, because the mathematician was so preoccupied in problem solving, he blah 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 blah. And there it was, preoccupied in. No, he was preoccupied by or preoccupied with. But you wouldn't say preoccupied in. That would be considered a grammatical mistake that they'd want you to identify. Okay, so that's the material that is covered. Let me just quickly tell you the format, and then maybe I'll give a couple little tips on how to approach game day, whether it's Wednesday or Saturday, and then I'll just take questions. Excuse me. Any questions so far on the material that's covered? We're all happy?
No.
Okay. Okay, what did I say I was going to do next? Oh, yeah, the format. Okay, so this is a 2-hour and 10-minute exam. So moms and dads, you can do your kids a favor. Sophomores and juniors, you can do yourselves a favor by getting a good night's sleep for 2 or 3 nights before your test. This is not just a crusty 50-year-old saying get to bed early. This is a test prep professional saying if you want to get the highest scores of which you are capable, get a good night's sleep for several nights in a row. Why? Because 2 hours and 10 minutes of concentrating as hard as you can is something you're probably not used to and will test your mental endurance. You don't want to test your mental endurance after a night or two of less. Oh my God, my son is blowing up my phone. I apologize. I told him I was doing this. He obviously needs help in school, apparently.
What does Fake want?
Will you text him and tell him, Mandy, please, to stop calling me until 9 o'clock? Thank you.
I will tell him.
Thank you, sweetheart. Okay.
You're welcome.
That's my daughter, Jessica, who's taking this from her room. Anyway.
I figured.
She's a junior. She needs to learn this. She's also doing my PSAT class. She's just helping out Dad by being a body in the room, see? Anyway, so one of the things that, unfortunately, these tests, which has nothing to do with your academic readiness for college or your intelligence or anything, is stamina. And concentrating as hard as you can for 2 hours and 10 minutes is no simple matter when we're trained in school to concentrate in 42-minute sprints or 50-minute sprints, okay? Also, let me just say that even though it's 2 hours and 10 minutes of testing, you will be in the exam room a lot longer than 2 hours and 10 minutes. The first 30 or 45 minutes, you will be filling out bubble sheets, name, date, serial number, and then also answering a whole number of questions about what you like in school, what you might want to study later on. I would encourage all the students who watch this to take that seriously. Obviously, it doesn't count towards your score, and some less mature students make a joke of it and make patterns out of the bubble sheets and don't really answer it seriously, but they're doing themselves a disservice because the answers to those questions actually generates the junk mail, because some of it isn't junk, that you will be getting from colleges for the next 12 months of your life. So if you think you may want to be an engineer, indicate that. You will get junk mail from engineering schools and engineering programs at liberal arts schools. That may not be junk mail for you. You might find a school that you never heard of that way. So, do the best you can to answer those questions. It can only help you. Okay, so basically, the format of the test is you're going to get 4 25-minute sections, and they will alternate critical reading math, and then one 30-minute section at the end of grammar. So that adds up to 130 minutes, or your 2 hours and 10 minutes. The sections are self-contained, meaning they'll say turn the page and begin. Usually they'll give you a 2-minute warning. After 25 minutes, pencils down, that section's over. You're not allowed to go back and look. So let's say you're really good at math and not so good in reading. You can't think, oh, I'm going to speed through the math and finish with 5 minutes to spare and use those 5 minutes on the critical reading. Good thinking, but that's cheating. You can't do that. So that's the format. Let me just give you a couple tips, and then we'll just open it up to questions, including if you want to ask questions. If you wanted to do some preparation, I strongly recommend preparing out of this book. This is the College Board book. And the reason I recommend this book is these are the people who write not only the SAT, but also the PSAT. They're the only people with the legal copyright rights to publish actual PSAT and SAT questions. If you read the fine print of Princeton Review, Barron's, McGraw-Hill, those are all fine books. I use them as secondary sources with my students. They will say these are just like the SATs, just like the PSATs. They're not the real deal. This is the real deal. So I would encourage you all, every junior, and I imagine sophomores, but I don't know that, but every junior should have received by now a PSAT booklet from your school that contains a practice PSAT. I would highly recommend doing that just to get used to the level of difficulty, get used to the style of questions, read and know the directions in advance. There is 0% chance that the directions will be one word different from what's in the booklet. So you can know those in advance and hit the ground running with question number 1. And then I would study these vocab lists that you put up in the group chat. And then if you want to do more practice, you can practice out of this book. You will notice on the College Prep Express website, I write a lot of blogs about standardized tests. That's about 1/3 of what we do here. The other 2/3 being helping kids in school by tutoring them subjects and helping them package themselves in their college applications. But in my blog post about the PSAT, I've written about why I believe it's a good idea to take the PSAT seriously and study for them. And you can study for them in the next few days. I'm not saying you have to spend months and months doing this, but I think it's the old conventional wisdom was go into the PSAT cold, see how you do, use it as a diagnostic, and then, wow, it just keeps flashing back and forth. Okay. The PSAT as a diagnostic said, the old conventional wisdom, and then when you get your results back, you can, know where you need to focus. Well, that made a lot of sense in the old days when they didn't have score choice and when kids waited until May to take their first SATs. But now, in the era of score choice, where colleges only need to know about your best scores, you get to see your scores before you tell the College Board or the ACT company to release them to schools. Now students are taking them much earlier in the junior year. So the PSATs become more important. I think even more important is that the PSAT sets a baseline. In my 25 years experience in doing this, I can say emphatically that very few students go down from the PSAT. Even without test prep, even without a lot of studying, kids go up. Why? A number of reasons. Number one, they've done it before. They get the hang of it. Things that you do the second, third, and fourth time, you tend to do better than the first time. Also, what are you doing in the intervening months? You're doing things like reading books, doing math homework, reading, all the skills that are tested. So here's the thing. If you know you're going to be setting a baseline with your PSATs, how high do you want to set your baseline? Do you want to go in cold and have a low baseline and go up from here? Or do you want to study and start here and go up? So I think that's the most compelling reason to study. Another reason is that I think it gives juniors a sense of what it's going to be like to actually buckle down and carve out the necessary time to study for PSATs and ACTs. And let me just make a quick disclaimer. I don't believe the PSAT or ACT is a very good test, either one of them. I certainly don't believe they predict, I know they don't predict how well students do in college. I've read the research. They don't measure intelligence. They don't measure how well you'll do in the real world in any reasonable measure. They certainly don't predict professional success. They don't predict how good a parent you'll be. They don't tell you anything worth knowing, okay? Having said that, unfortunately, they still carry a lot of weight in most schools' decisions about whom to accept and whom to reject. So, it's a great joke that they don't measure anything worth measuring, but they count. So, knowing that they count for most schools, there is, I'm happy to say, a growing number of test optional schools. But knowing that they count means you need to carve out time to do the best you can. When it comes time to apply, to actually setting up your initial list of schools that you might apply to, your guidance counselor is going to look at two numbers. he or she is going to look at your GPA and your PSATs. So for all of these reasons, it's a good idea to try to do your best. So I'm glad you're watching this, and hopefully this will help you get a little bit better score. Okay, before I take any questions for the rest of the time, I'll just spend a couple of minutes. I'll give you what I like to call my game day tips. So this is for students who are taking it next Wednesday, next Saturday. What you want to do, because it's I like to make an analogy to a marathon. As I said earlier, it's 2 hours and 10 minutes. We're not used to that. It's analogous to running a marathon. You need to prepare not only in terms of your sleep, but also in terms of your nutrition. It's important the morning of the PSAT, eat a high-protein, low-carb breakfast. The reason for that is you don't eat any sugar, because what goes up must come down. So you avoid the frosted flakes, pancakes with syrup, glasses of orange juice, anything that's going to give you a sugar spike. Great, you might be very focused for the first 45 minutes, and then you're going to start nodding off for the last 2/3 of the test. So the best foods to eat are eggs and oatmeal, high protein, low carb. I also encourage students to bring a candy bar or granola bar or an apple or a sports drink or something with sugar, and to have that an hour before the end. So, the first 45 minutes you're not even testing, you're just in the room. Then you're going to test for an hour, hour and a half. Okay, at that point, have your granola bar, your Hershey bar, your apple during one of the breaks between the last couple of sections. And yeah, you'll have a sugar spike, but who cares? It'll carry you through to the end of the test. You're going to be tired when the test is over anyway. It's also a good idea to be in your own quiet space in school on the day of the test. I used to proctor these exams for a decade in my 20s, and I used to watch students drive themselves insane in groups of 3, 4, and 5, flopping and twirling about, oh my God, I don't know anything. The words are so hard. The math, I don't know the math. Did you study math? I don't know any of the grammar. Do you know the grammar? Oh my God. Okay, this does not bode well for maximizing our scores. Okay, if you want to get the highest score that you're capable of getting, just be in your own space. Right? If any of your friends come running up to you and you can just see panic written on their faces, just smile and nod and move on, okay? The other thing kids will do is they'll run up and be like, oh my God, did you hear about the party the other night? What Bob said to Marion? Oh my God. Okay, you can say to them, listen, I want to hear all about it after the test. Right now, I just really want to focus and walk away, okay? But you want to be in a quiet, meditative place. I'm not just saying this because I'm an old fuddy-duddy 50-year-old. I'm saying this because I've read the research. Kids who do this outperform kids who don't. Okay, so similarly between sections, don't be one of the kids in the hallway comparing it. What'd you get for that problem about the blah-bitty-blah? Okay, it's over. If you want to do that after the whole test is over because you're curious about a math problem or two or grammar, great, but not during the test. You want to stay in that quiet, meditative space from the time you get to school to the time they say pencils down after the grammar section. Okay, that's all I got. That's all I got in terms of presentation, and it's about 40 minutes more than I expected. So I'm going to shut up now, and I'd be happy to take any questions in general about the PSATs or test prep, or if you want to ask me specific questions in the book or any book, I've got them all right here, so fire away.
I only have one question.
Sure.
And that is relating to the turnaround time for the scores. You mentioned that it takes 8 weeks.
Yeah. It's one of the ironic things about the PSAT. It's the shortest test given, and it takes by far the longest to score and get back. I don't know why. There's no essay to grade. Maybe it's that more kids take the PSAT because pretty much every junior takes it, but they're always given mid-October. They always come back mid-December. Now, I always counsel students to follow the PSAT with the ACT in December. And the reason for that is you want your kids to take both a PSAT or a SAT and an ACT in the fall or early winter to know which test they're better at. Okay, because some kids are going to be better at SATs, some kids are going to be better at ACTs, and it's not always easy to predict. I mean, I do this for a living. I'm pretty good at predicting, but there's a reasonable percentage that surprised me just because it's how individual kids' brains interpret the questions. They're different styles. It's important to take both. Colleges only need to know about one. So if you take the PSAT in October and you take the ACT in early December, ha ha ha, you will get both scores back within days of each other. The ACTs turn around in like 12 days. And the PSATs turn around in like 2 months. So you come home from your winter vacation and you will have in hand a college board score, and which will be the PSAT score, which will be a good indicator of where you stand in the SAT, and you will have an ACT score. And then that will dictate where you want to focus moving forward. Maybe you did so much better in the ACTs, you're like, I'm not even going to bother with the SATs, or vice versa. Or you might have done ballpark in both, and you say, I'm going to keep taking them alternating, and they tend to leapfrog until I get the score I'm looking for. I mean, that's part of the good news in this era. Every kid has a number, that number being the highest, or the number they need to get into their most competitive school. So, for example, if a kid's most competitive school, most kids on Naviance are saying they're getting in with a 2,000 or better, right? A kid could say, okay, if I get 2,000 or better, that's my number. So I will take tests until I get that number, and then I stop. The goal, of course, is to do one and done. That's the carrot I dangle in front of my students. Study hard for the first one, be one and done. But for many kids, there's a learning curve involved. As I said, students tend to do better the second, third, fourth time. Sometimes 5 is the charm, and I'm not exaggerating. I have students every couple of years who are about to throw in the towel. They make themselves take it one last time, and suddenly the switch is flipped, and they go up 150 to 300 points. It takes what it takes. There's a cartoon that I use in my college admission secrets talk from the New Yorker, where it shows a kid, trundling like SAT book and an ACT book, and the caption says, "Psych, 3 SATs down, 2 ACTs to go." And everyone's first reaction is, "Oh my God, what are we doing to our children? We're making them test crazy." But the truth is, really, by taking more of these tests, it actually diffuses a lot of the anxiety and stress around the process, because you know that when you take them, if you don't do well, you got another shot. You got another shot. Now, I want to just make sure that I say that there are some schools that ask you to report all your scores, but they are very few, and I'll say this even though I know I'm broadcasting it, I don't have a problem advising my students just because they ask doesn't mean you have to tell. And the reason I tell them that is I have read the College Board's policy when they published their score choice, and you could read it. It's on the College Board, and they say, we are attempting to address the epidemic of stress and anxiety that these high-stakes standardized tests are putting on our children. So we are going to try to diffuse that by making them score optional, by making them not automatically sent to school. You get to see your results, and if you don't like them, you do not have to feel obligated to send them to schools. I agree with that as a parent and as an educator. And then if some school comes along and says, well, we don't really care about your psychological health, send us all your scores. To those schools, I don't have a problem saying no, thank you. I mean, and here's the truth. Legally, schools cannot find out whether you've taken more than what you report. The only legal way for a school to find out whether you've taken an SAT or an ACT is for you to pay the College Board or the ACT company to submit the scores to those colleges. So, and I don't want to freak people out. I'm talking about I mean, off the top of my head, I know Yale asks for all of them, Georgetown asks for all of them, Stanford asks you to report all of them, and that's off the top of my head all I can think of. So 3 among thousands of schools. Most schools say, send the scores you want us to see, because they respect the score choice policy. Does that answer your question? I don't even remember what it was.
Yes, I have one more question.
Sure.
If nobody else does. And that is, would you recommend preparing differently for the ACT than the SAT?
Yes,
No.
I would. They are definitely different tests. I would recommend the best prep for both are College Prep Express's 6-session SAT prep class, and I have a 6-session ACT prep class. And the format is similar. The first class, I go over all the strategies, tricks, all the material you have to know. And then in the subsequent 5 classes, we essentially go over 5 full-length tests that the kids are assigned for homework. Now, the ACT...
It's a great class.
Thank you.
The teacher's really great.
Thanks. No, you can't have a bigger allowance. No, I'm kidding. Thanks, Andy.
What allowance? I'm just a College Prep Express student talking about how great College Prep Express is.
All right, enough. So, the ACT is a different enough test, and I'll give you a quick sense, a little bit more specifically of what I mean. On the ACT, you don't have to spend 1 minute studying vocab. I will tell you this, the ACT is a much easier, in the sense of, from a student's perspective, less time-consuming test to prepare for. For the simple reason, you do not have to learn those 500 words. To learn the 500 words that are commonly tested on the SAT, you got to put in a lot of hours. None of those hours have to be put in for the ACT. The ACT prep is more practice intensive. It's more skill based. The key skill, the number one most important skill in the ACT is time management. There are more questions per time on the ACT than on the SAT. So I work with students a lot on how to manage time in general and in each of the 5 subtests. The ACT has a test of English, which is grammar, math, reading, science, which is reading comprehension and science, and writing, which actually is an essay. And in each of those tests, there are time management strategies to make sure you maximize your score. In general, an obvious one, well, not so obvious to students, but I think obvious to most adults, is if you understand that every item counts the same, that you don't get more points for harder questions, you actually want to focus your time on the easier and medium level questions because they're easier to get, right? And I tell kids all the time, if your history tests or math tests in school were such that every single question was worth 5 points, you might choose not to write the essay that takes 20 minutes at the end. You'll be like, you know what? I'll take the 95 and make sure I get all 95 points and not even write the essay. That would be a legitimately good strategy if every question counted the same. But in a school test, the 20-minute essay counts 40% of the test. Can't leave that blank. On the PSAT, hard questions don't count more than easy questions. On the ACT, hard questions don't count more than the easy ones, so you focus on the easy ones. Also on the ACT, there is a science section. It is decidedly not a science test in the sense of you don't have to have any prior knowledge of science, right? I always think about it this way. If the math test tests, what we consider foundational math that we expect all of our high school kids to learn, like you can't take the PSAT and not know there are 180 degrees in a triangle, or a squared plus b squared equals c squared, or the ratio of sides in a 30-60-90 triangle, etc. But you can take the test in science and not know a thing about biology, chemistry, or physics. You don't even have to know that there are 4 chambers in the human heart. God forbid, the Krebs cycle. You don't have to know how to balance chemical equations or anything about the periodic table of elements. You don't have to know Avogadro's number. You don't have to know stoichiometry. You don't have to know anything about physics, none of Newton's laws. So what is the science test? It's essentially being able to interpret data as it's presented in graphs, in charts, and in diagrams. So it's really a glorified reading comprehension test where the passages are all in science. So, yeah, there are the prep is absolutely essential for the ACT because there are just tricks. It's a very beatable test, let me put it that way. And I'm not saying you have to sign up for my class, although I take a lot of pride in it. I get really good results from it.
It's a great class.
Thank you. You could take a motivated kid and get him the book. Here's the book. In the same way I recommended earlier that you use only the real official College Board SAT study guide, for the ACT, you should really use only this book, which is, as its title suggests, real ACTs. This is the only book that has 5 full-length actual ACTs. Your test won't be, kind of like these. It'll be just like these. So, if you have a bright and ambitious kid, this book is all you need. If you take the test under strict timed conditions, all the answers are explained. You can get a rocket high score with this alone. Most kids, in my experience, need a little bit of motivation, need a little bit of support, may not be able to understand all the explanations in the book. That's where a class or a tutor comes in handy. Any other questions?
Not from me. This is really helpful. I appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure. If you want to hang on, I'm going to end this and we can talk privately about other stuff if you'd like.
Okay.
Okay, Mandy, do you have any questions?
No. I do.
Well, you can bring them.
Oh, yeah, I do.
What?
Do I have to print anything out to take to the PSAT on Wednesday?
No, because your father did pay for you, so you're registered. You just have to make sure you have your hall ID, your school ID.
That's all I need?
That's all you need.
Okay, so there's nothing.
And make sure you look like yourself.
Okay.
And that's all.
Get all dolled up.
Atta girl.
And I'll smile all funny and close one eye like my student ID picture.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, well, I hope this has been helpful to people watching, and this is Q&A with College Prep Express. I'm Dr. Yo. We do this every week. There is a link on our website under the menu ePrep. You'll see drop down for Q&A. You're welcome to sign up for as many as you like and ask questions about anything relating to getting into college. That's what we do here. So thanks for watching, and that's a wrap.